Okay, it's actually been a couple of weeks since I have gotten a chance to get back on here to continue the current video series I'm working on about subtle mind manipulation and control tactics of the AA cult. Last week, I pretty much, not last week, 2 weeks ago, I don't know, I pretty much touched upon the type of peer pressure a newcomer faces when they attend their first AA meeting, uh, how you're pretty much I don't think it takes very long before you see there's a bit of a hierarchy in AA, and the hierarchy pretty much decides who belongs and who doesn't. One particular defense I've seen from pro AA people, we can't be a cult because we don't have any leaders, which is actually a crock of shit because every AA meeting and every AA group has leaders. I'm sure anybody that's at a home group for any extended period of time, or anybody who's gone to any meeting for an extended period of time, realizes sooner rather than later that there's a little bit of a controlling hierarchy that sits at the top of the meeting, and they treat it like there's some kind of powerful uh, entity that cannot be questioned. That whenever they speak at meetings, whenever they're called on, their words are treated as some great infallible truth that all the newer members will hang on everything they say, laugh at all their jokes, and reiterate whatever it is they repeat or regurgitate. Um, and I kind of wanted to get a little bit upon. I didn't get a chance to touch it in the last video much, but I had brought up the fact that when you're oftentimes a newcomer, your life is not doing so well in the outside world. And I mean, it would be kind of ridiculous to say that if you're abusing alcohol or abusing drugs, that your life is going to be all that wonderful anyway. It's one aspect that AA uses when they're trying to ensnare you into their little trap. Because when you're entering in there, most of the times, if you're a new guy like I was, or if you're court ordered or whatever it is, chances are you do have an alcohol or drug problem, and you're trying to figure out some way to beat it or some kind of way to live without it. But is that what really AA is all about? Uh, in my long period of time there, I actually say no, that's not what it's about. It's not about living an alcohol free life. It's not about pursuing your own independence, your dreams, your goals, or having a life outside of your addiction. I've actually discovered what that is since I've left AA and got away from the cult. Is I'm able to actually build my own life around my own ideas, my own hopes, my own dreams. I'm able to think independently. I'm not accountable to anyone. I don't have to have an anointment of the sacred home group to decide what's right and wrong. I don't have to be accountable to anybody. I pretty much make decisions based on whatever my own ethical, I guess, worldviews are. Um, because AA is really not about living independently from alcohol. AA is about swapping one dependency, alcohol and drugs, to a dependency on them, a dependency upon their religious cult. It's not at all about such things. You won't hear such words as independence, the ability to control your own life, self-determination, uh, believing in yourself, or having strength of your own. You won't ever hear those types of things discussed in meetings. And if they are discussed, they're usually discussed in very derogatory manners. I remember that was one of the first things that sort of bothered me when I got exposed to the cult, even though I did stay for a lot longer than I should have before I was court ordered at a later time period. But anything that you've done in your life prior to joining AA is pretty much looked upon as one big epic failure. You never did anything remotely good. You never did anything remotely kind. You never did anything from an altruistic standpoint. You were just this selfish, diseased alcoholic. And you're not allowed to take credit for anything you've ever done, or even in the program, you find out right away that you're not allowed to say, I successfully quit drinking, or I successfully stopped my addictive behavior, or I got help from my problem. All those types of any kind of talk that sort of indicates a type of independence or the ability to believe in yourself or anything like that. It's heavily, heavily discouraged. People oftentimes, you could say those things in meetings if you want to, but you would experience a bit of a cold shoulder. You wouldn't, definitely the hierarchy would reject you because you're not falling in line lockstep with the AA ideology, I guess, for want of a better term, because that's the whole entire program is based upon the fact that you are diseased, you are ill, you are sick, you are immoral, that you have no good capabilities, that you have no inner strength, that you have no good determination. And what they generally use to belittle you with is that, well, look at where your life is now, you know. And really and truly, it took me a long time to see the utter falseness of this. Bad decisions in life or addictions or, you know, drug abuse or anything that might happen generally happens to people based on circumstances that I'm going to say is not as clear cut as a lot of people like to believe. It's not like you woke up one morning and said, oh, I want to get addicted to booze and everything fall apart. Now, AA snares you into their little web of lies and deceit because they tell you that you didn't want that to happen, but it happened anyway. Therefore, you are utterly without power. Therefore, you're utterly, you're utterly flawed. You're incapable of thinking on your own. And I think the one thing that I wanted to begin on in this video is the one aspect that I think should be painfully obvious when it comes to a cult is what's the first thing they try to do? They try to attack your thinking. They try to attack your sense of self. They try to kind of get you off your feet. They make you feel like that if you can't trust your own thinking, you know, what can you do? You gotta have them. I remember it was kind of a really disconcerting time in the early days when I was first exposed because I did fall for it. I mean, I did. In the early days, I was desperate enough to believe that there was actually some answer in all of this. And but I remember kind of getting a fearful belief in my own self when I was told repeatedly that you can't trust your own thinking, that your own thinking will always lead you to drunkenness. And they conveniently point out a few examples in your life, maybe, you know, maybe a few, maybe 1,000, where you made decisions that ultimately led to drunkenness, and that's used as a reinforcement to continue to break your spirit a little bit more. They don't point out all the good decisions you might have made in life. They don't point out all the sound decisions you might have made in life. They don't point out the number of times you might have just done the right thing, even when it cost you something, or the number of times you went out of your way to do a good deed, maybe. You'll never hear about those things. They take the things out of your life that were destructive, that you are ashamed of, that you are feeling guilty about, and they use those against you. They use those to control you, really, because you really kind of exist in a type of echo chamber in AA. You know, it's, like I said in the last video, they'll often talk about, well, you know, we're not on a compound somewhere. We're not, you know, isolating people from the outside world. Our members can watch television and the internet and all of that. Hey, yeah, but the truth of the matter is you kind of live in a type of isolated echo chamber because everybody you kind of talk to is AA. The people you see every day is AA. You've heard 90 meetings in 90 days. And the constant reinforcement that's kept in your mind all the time continuously is if you quit doing these things, you're going to get drunk and you're going to die. And another form of manipulation that I've noticed that they use is they'll oftentimes repeat stories of people. Like if for instance in a meeting, if you said, you know, I don't really agree with what I'm hearing here, or if you said I don't feel I need a sponsor, I don't feel I have to work any steps or something like that, inevitably 2 or 3 people are going to share and they're going to talk about how they knew a guy that was just like this. And of course they'll say they're not talking to you, but of course they really are talking to you. They'll say they knew a guy that, you know, didn't think he needed the steps, and he was intelligent, and he was too smart for his own good. And then they'll, you know, in these overly melodramatic tones, they'll say, you know, and he's dead now, you know, he blew his brains out, and he never got the program. Or you'll hear meetings where a topic like 4th and 5th step are brought up, and you'll hear over and over and over again from several people about all the people that are actively drunk, or all the people who are dead, or all the people who have committed suicide, because they wouldn't do a fourth and fifth step. You'll hear repeated tales of people who didn't make it in the program and are now dead because they quit working the steps. You will hear members who have, had really bad relapses, and they're expected to say when they come back, well, I didn't do a fifth step. I never was honest with the sponsor. Now, a lot of people, it's kind of, even for me now, after being away from it for a long time, I can actually look at this from an outsider's perspective, and I can actually say, I don't know how the hell I fell for any of this garbage, but it's really, really hard to see when you're surrounded by it day and night, when the only people you talk to are kind of people in there. If you'll notice, AA also kind of encourages you to sort of cut ties with the outside world, which is really not hard to do. If you've been abusing drugs, abusing alcohol, or whatever it is you do out there, out there. I just slipped back into cult speak just that easily. But if you have been, chances are your life, you're pretty much feeling quite alienated from society, from the outside world. I mean, feeling alienated from society is not such a bad thing. Being kind of a hermit pessimist that I am anyway, but I'm saying you're kind of feeling isolated and alienated from your everyday surroundings. Chances are you've gotten in trouble at work. Chances are you kind of got your family upset with you, whether they're in the wrong or in the right. That's another whole entire video and subject right there. Chances are some of your good friends are probably not wanting to be around you as much. They're telling you things like, you drink too much, you made a fool out of yourself and you ruined my party. So you're kind of feeling like you're not really accepted into the outside world anyway. And then you get into the cult fellowship, and you're told that you're mentally and physically different from everyone else, and you're given kind of this classification that you're like you're some kind of weird medical curiosity that's incapable of ever being normal. And you're kind of also told that nobody in the outside world would understand you. You're kind of told they're just normal people, they don't get it. It never occurred to me to question the fact that a lot of the times when they were saying things like the reason, people have cut you off in your everyday life, it's because they're normal people. They're not like you. It's like something out of fucking Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something, not one of us. Some shit like that. But it really does get into your head. It really does, when you're around that all the time and you exist in kind of this echo chamber where that's the only things you hear and that's the only things you associate with and that's the only type of people that you even network with. Now, in the days when I joined, there was no Facebook. There wasn't even MySpace yet, I remember when MySpace actually took over the world for a little while. I don't know if anybody out there remembers that or not, but I remember when it was, everything was MySpace. But that didn't exist either at the time. The only real communication you had that was critical of AA, actually, you might find a book here and there in the library that might, say, well, alcoholism's not a disease. I remember I can't think of her name. She was a fitness expert, and she had determined that, there were ways to beat addiction with, nutrition, dieting, exercise, or something like that. I mean, I remember I found one of her books, and of course, another good cult aspect of AA is what I was about to get on right there, because I mentioned her book one time to some people in AA, and of course, without even knowing who I was talking about, without even knowing anything about the book, without knowing, no knowledge on the subject whatsoever, the first thing they did is they said, well, she was never really an alcoholic to begin with, otherwise she would have died. If she is an alcoholic, she will die drunk. You notice there's this classification that happens the minute you're in AA for a little while. You're either one of them or you're, one of these people out there. That's another weird thing I noticed from the get-go. When I would ask about somebody I hadn't seen in a little while, I might say something like, I hadn't seen John or Tommy in a little while. Where they at? Someone will say in real hushed tones, oh, they're out there. They're back out there. I don't know where out there exists. I don't know if it's like some wasteland and some faraway science fiction fantasy world where everybody just sits around drunk 24/7, or exactly where out there was supposed to be anyway. Or they do the other thing. They just say, well, he never was really an alcoholic to begin with. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made it out there. Already they've kind of put this thing in your head that you have this disease, you have this mental deficiency, you're not quite like everybody else, and nobody on earth is going to accept you anywhere. Nobody. I got to tell this real quickly. I remember an old timer used to say things like, if you think you're normal, just go to an ordinary social gathering and talk about drinking a gallon of vodka a day and throwing up everywhere and see what they do to you. The truth of the matter is, and it didn't occur to me at the time, the truth of the matter is, if you showed up to a normal social gathering and said that, most people would probably look at you and say, so what? Who gives a shit if you do that or not? I mean, what does that got to do with us? There again, there's the little isolated division that's telling you that nobody will ever get you except us. Nobody will ever understand you except us. And the people that don't ever become one of us, well, they're out there somewhere, and they're dying, or they're dead, and you'll be out there too. It's a subtle little bit of fear control that exists right there. And look at the false information that they kind of spread. I mean, their literature states that nobody who's ever a true alcoholic, I think that's a funny thing. Look up no true Scotsman fallacy, by the way, on that one, but can ever return to normal drinking. You never hear about the number of people who have actually overcome drinking and returned to moderate drinking. You never hear about alternatives to 12-step approaches. If you do hear about those alternatives, they're said kind of in mocking tones. They're said kind of in derogatory ways. I remember one time a guy did bring up, I think he brought up rational recovery or something like that in a meeting, and like the next three people that talked had the demean, to give you the overall gist, some asshole had to say there's a lot of people who come into AA and they think they're smart and they think they can do this on their own and they're all dead, I mean, no time do you ever hear about alternative methods. No times do you ever hear about the fact that the dichotomy of you either are 100% abstinent all the days of your life or you're dead. You never do hear anything else but that, and it becomes a little subtle mind manipulation, a programmed response, almost like Pavlov and his dogs, they're salivating when they hear bells ringing. Because I truly believe that for the longest, and I actually believe it's what made my relapses 10 times worse, because I wasn't a fifth of gallon of vodka a day guy when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't, I was drinking really heavily. I was drinking in the mornings, and I was kind of I was a bit spiraling out of control. I had some things that was going on that was it would have been just better for me if I just didn't have hangovers every day when I got to Quackaholics Anonymous. And of course, I was told that maybe I wasn't in enough pain, that you have to be in enough pain, and I was told that it's going to get worse, it's never going to get better, and I was told that if you have one drink, it's one drunk. I was told 1,000 is too many. One is too many, and 1,000 is not enough. And I was fed that narrative over and over and over. And I found out later on after leaving that a lot of people had the same problem with that narrative. I drank me a half pint one night and nothing happened to me. I drank me a couple of swallows of vodka and nothing really bad happened. And then this weird feeling came, well, I've actually screwed up. I'm off the wagon. I'm out there. I'm out there now, and really and truly the way I looked at it is, well, if I'm truly not sober anymore and I've truly lost all my time and I'm truly got to go in there, you got to do the little walk of shame, get the white chip, and you got to have everybody kind of look down their noses at you and all that other kind of stuff. I might as well just get drunk, I've seen before other cases of people that would, have them a couple of beers over the weekend and they would come back in to try to get a white chip or something like that. And they would actually say, well, I'm not in sufficient enough pain. I haven't bottomed out enough, so I'm probably going to get drunk again anyway. There is a bit of a self-defeating narrative that they sort of program into you. And it's designed not so much to help you overcome alcohol. I don't believe it is at all. I believe it's to keep you helpless and dependent upon them. If you notice, you never hear anybody in AA say, after, a year or two, I just didn't need it anymore, and I left, and now I come in and visit once in a while, and I don't need sponsors or anything like that. If you do hear that, I mean, you'll see those people are kindly, they're treated as kind of like on the outskirts. They're treated as as someone who's not fully a part of. And again, you'll eventually hear somebody talking about how that person's going to drink and die again. Uh, you're also discouraged. You'll never hear about, say, the number of sponsors in there that do deplorable things to their sponsees. That's suppressed. You only hear good stories about how my sponsor, it's like Mr. fucking Miyagi and the freaking Karate Kid or whatever. You always hear about these wise gurus that always have the right things to say at the right exact moments. And you always hear about, all these little miracles and all these wonderful things that take place when you do the steps. You don't ever hear about the people like myself that did 5 steps and just said, this don't make me feel no better. This just makes me feel worse. How is wallowing in guilt the rest of your life supposed to make you feel any better? You won't ever hear any questions like that brought up. Everything is suppressed and it's controlled, and and in essence, you're isolated from the rest of the world. It's a subtle form of isolation. It's a subtle form of mind manipulation. It's a way to keep you cut off from society in general. You see how many people I've noticed who, in meetings that will say, I really had to have this meeting today because I'm having a problem at work. It's no different than saying I really needed a beer when I got off work today because I'm having a problem. You're almost like trained to only have good feelings when you are in a meeting or doing AA things. In fact, if you'll notice, another very cultish aspect of it is that positive feelings of any kind are suppressed unless it has to do with giving AA cult credit. I've heard people, try to preach that if you practice acts of altruism, you're just doing it to make yourself feel good, which I never did really understand the dismissiveness of that. I mean, if you do a good act for a good person, if you do a good act for somebody, an act of altruism, and it makes you feel better about yourself, they say that like it's a bad thing. I mean, what is it? You're supposed to do something good for somebody and feel horrible about yourself? I mean, I don't know where they get their understandings of the human condition from, but there again, that's more of evidence, in my opinion, of what kind of a mind control cult this is, because they twist normal human emotions and they make them unclean things. They make them, negative things. They make anything that you feel good about yourself into be a bad thing. But if you're praising the cult, or you're reading a big book, or you're talking to your sponsor, or you're sharing 5-step bullshit in meetings, then you are permissibly allowed to feel some kind of joy, some kind of euphoria, some kind of even almost pride in yourself. But you can't say that you're proud of yourself for doing the work. You had to say, what is it some of these people say when they're called on, by the grace of God, good sponsorship, and the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm sober today. Those are the only times you're actually allowed to feel good, positive emotions. Those are the only times you're really allowed to be happy, joyous, free. Anything else is pretty much looked down upon in some derogatory manner. It's looked upon as your disease talking. Anytime even if you want to just steal, what is that thing in the big book, vicarious pleasure for yourself. So even if you have a day off from work and you just feel like watching TV and fucking off and doing nothing, that's kind of a 12-step sin, because you're all into self again. And it looks like there's going to be a part 3 in this series, because I didn't even get to cover everything from part 1 and part 2 in this one. So I guess at 23 minutes, I probably said all I need to say for this evening. So I guess I'll see you guys hopefully next week and not in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned.